As you can see, we're still kind of early. I think there's like 30 chapters. So according to the Kindle, we're 28% in. But anyways, so basically it's about a girl. She is a bounty hunter, and she's a bounty hunter, and she has a partner named Grim, who is a lichen hound. And basically, like, we just been introduced to them. They caught like a werewolf at the beginning, and then we learned about their like backstory, and we learned about their how they met and all that good stuff. And then after we learned about that, we learned about, what is her name? Floretta is the boss name, which is, oh gosh. Okay, as y'all can see, every single time. Oh, Cressida. She, we meet her boss, which is Floretta, and then Floretta's like dad, who is the vet and stuff. And then we learned that Cressida mom is living with Floretta's dad. So we just learned about them and whatnot. And now we have a new bounty, and we're basically on the way to that bounty. So that is where we are. Okay. It's amazing what a full night's rest can do for a body. Grim and I slept on the spare bed, as we always did, starting an early bedtime of 8 o'clock in the evening. By the time 4 in the morning rolled around, we were both refreshed and ready to tackle another job. I spent a good half hour grooming myself thoroughly, since I didn't always have the opportunity on the road. The ablutions? I think that's how you say it. Some of these words I actually looked up to try to pronounce, but once again, I'll probably, forget. So ablutions, I believe is how you say it, finished. All that was left to do was eat a quick breakfast and hitch up Humbert. We had already packed supplies, mostly extra food in case we were successful, and if our quarry needed to eat the night before. We were ready to roll by 5, just as the sky was turning from deep purple to rosy pink. Floretta held a cup of coffee in her hands as she sleepily shuffled out into the yard in her robe. She gave me another smile as I rechecked Humbert's gear one last time. "Stay safe out there," Floretta said, by way of goodbye. I headed to the back of the wagon to open it, since Grim had informed me earlier that he wished to ride for a while. The lazy dog. Floretta followed behind me, waiting for my response. As Grim jumped up, I turned to her. "Of course. You know how I am. Impetuous. With no sense of personal safety?" Floretta laughed while I shut the wagon door and glared at her, before cracking up and smiling along with her mirth. I climbed up into the seat, grabbing the reins. "This will be a walk in the park. I'll see you in a couple days," I told her. Waving, I flicked the reins at Humbert, who clomped into motion, leaving Floretta. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Hold on. So my cat is about to make a whole bunch of noise. So that's why I'm saying just hold on. Okay. I think we're good. Alright. Sorry. Who clomped into motion, leaving Floretta behind in her yard waving back at me. I was used to turning Humbert left out of the yard that I had to... I was so used to turning Humbert left out of the yard that I had to stop and purposely think what I was doing. But turn to right we did, and soon enough Humbert was plodding along at a steady pace as the sun peeked over the horizon and started the day in earnest. I had only ever come this way with Graham on foot, and when even then ventured on this road for about half a mile or so, I knew the right side held grassland, and the left was young, deciduous woodland, because often we did a little hunting in this area when we had a day off. The monotony of the scenery, along with the rhythmic clomp of horse hooves, lulled me into a state of mild torpor for the first few miles. But soon enough, as the cooler morning air gave way to cloudless, sunny skies, the grassland to the right changed into the same forest as the left. After another hour, the grass was swamped up completely by the thickening forest. Rabbit Hole Road also ceased to be, turning into a dirt path just barely wide enough for the wagon. It was obviously disused much of the time. Although there were some signs of activity near the more rutted areas, my senses sharpened back up as Humbert carefully navigated the pockmarked path. At new time, the road grew even worse. Up until this moment, we had been able to skirt around the larger potholes, but the road was especially narrow in this area. Despite urging Humbert carefully, the wagon lurched to a sudden halt. I swear under my breath, requesting the horse to hang tight, I hopped down for the seat to investigate. There was a prickly feeling on the back of my neck as I walked to the rear of the wagon, but my human side told me to ignore it. After all, I was in the middle of nowhere, so what could it be? I assumed it was just me getting squirrely, considering I had been human for about 7 hours at this point. Already I had felt my eyes getting itchy and my skin starting to ache. I would just go see what the problem was and perhaps take a little breath as a cat to unwind before continuing on. Just as I thought, when I rounded the back of the wagon, I could see the wheel was trapped in a very deep rut. A good push to the back while Humbert carefully pulled would do the trick. I put my right hand on the door latch to see if Graham could help. "Don't move," shouted a voice behind me. I obligated, my hand stealing on the door handle, my left making sure it could be seen by my unknown assailant. So much for being alone out here. I mentally kicked myself for allowing my human side to be so complacent. "Turn around." Again, I obligated. "Slowly," the voice hissed. I turned halfway, enough to see the owner of the voice. A tall, skinny, middle-aged man with shaggy blonde hair, a scraggly beard, and a very obvious hygiene deficiency. His clothes looked like they hadn't seen a washer, nor any body of water, ever. Although he stood about 6 feet away from me, the breeze wafted a smell of putrid body odor in my direction. He held a long dagger in his hand. It had undeniably seen cleaner days. Some days I cursed my petite frame and non-threatening features. After all, it led to... Sorry, hold on, I lost my spot. It led to a lot of my fellow hunters not taking me seriously. But other times, it was a bonus. For instance, at this moment, I observed the man from my frozen position through slightly downturned eyelashes. I wanted very much for him to not view me as a threat. He must have liked what he saw, for his craggy face broke out in a smile, showcasing discernible gaps in his heavily stained teeth. He moved toward a seemingly dominant predator until he was right in front of me. The knife, now inches from my body, was covered in rust and dried blood. I'm unharmed, I said meekly, shying away from the man. I tried to look as helpless and non-threatening as I could. I took a quick glance at my surroundings to see if he was alone. Chances were high he did not operate solo. The highwayman grinned lewdly, and I was up close and personal with his lack of full set of chompers. Well, what do we have here? He breathed on me. I tried to hold my breath at his halitosis hit me in the face. It's dangerous for a pretty girl to be out here alone. I've heard there's bandits about. A guffaw from the left side of the path gave away the location of a second man. I risked a quick glance in the direction, keeping the mask of fear on my face. As I did, a burly individual, just as dirty as Skinny, came out from behind a tree. He, too, held a dagger in his meaty ham hock. He gave my body a once-over and smiled vacuously. I held my gorge. So, 2 guys, no pistol or arrows, dirty blades. Everett, the actress, asked him timidly, "What are you going to do to me?" Skinny grinned again and scratched his head with his free hand. Well, we'll have some fun, but first we're going to relieve you of all your worldly possessions. Knudsen, he yelled at Burley. Keep an eye on her while I check the wagon. Can do, Knudsen replied in a lazy manner as he lumbered closer to me. That's when the fun started, but probably not in a way these bozos had envisioned. As Skinny started to turn the handle... Whoops. Oh, crap. Hold on. Okay. I stepped away from the wagon towards Burley, who was not expecting his victim to approach him at such a rapid rate. The minute the handle turned, the wagon doors exploded outward as a large, black, flying projectile launched itself directly at Skinny. As Graham landed on Skinny's chest, I whipped downwards, jabbed Burley in the groin with my pointy elbow, and plucked the dagger out of his hand. I parodied up and behind him. As his face turned red and his knees began to buckle, I jabbed the point between his shoulders blades just enough to let him know it was there. I glanced over at my partner, who was snarling into Skinny's face, flecks of spittle flying into the man's mouth every time he opened it to scream, which was at least every 2 seconds. I noted that the second dagger had flown out of the bandit's hands the moment the massive dog had hit him in the chest. In the meantime, Knudsen was groaning, but otherwise doing an excellent job of staying still. Wow, guys, that was fun, I called out. Now, how about we get into the back of my wagon? I know that's where you want it to be anyway. Rounding them up was easy. Nobody expects the pretty girl to be their doom. Give me 1 second. Chargrove, once upon a time, was a bustling community built around a small gold claim that paid big for about 100 years. Once the gold mine dried up about 50 years ago, so did much of the town. Now, it either took a special breed of courage or stupidity to live a full life there. It wasn't quite a ghost town, but the existing Chargrovers were few and far between. They made for a tight-knit community that looked out for each other no matter what. The town was shaped like a U, with the main road coming in at the top and a small back road bifurcating the shape at the very bottom. A genuine well sat in the very middle, surrounded by the saddest patch of grass I had ever seen. All the buildings looked the same, ancient wooden structures with no signs to details what might lay inside. There were plenty of town folks around, although as my wagon rattled into the heart of the dying town, I saw more than a few people scurrying inside the nearest doorway, like cockroaches escaping light. The braver individuals simply stopped whatever they were doing and stared, their disbelief at my otherness boring into me. I stopped in front of an elderly lady who glared up at me. "Pardon me, ma'am," I said as politely as I could. "Would you direct me to the sheriff's station?" The old woman did not take her eyes off mine, as if I'll transform into a monster and devour her if she did. But she pointed one gnarled finger to the opposite side of the U. I thanked her graciously and led Humbert to the sheriff's station, which apparently doubled as his house, judging by the multiple children running in and out of the door. Two of the smaller ones stopped to watch, their little noses running freely. I hid my disgust as best as I could. Poor personal hygiene was a sore spot for me. As Humbert rolled to a top, I reached into a vest pocket for my watch. 3:00, almost on the dot. It had taken me 10 hours to get here, and I mentally patted myself on the back for the speedy travel. I surmised that taking the known road to Chargrove would add at least 5 hours, more likely 8 to that travel time. Still, I felt the clock ticking. If I was going to beat the other hunters to the reward, I needed to be quick. Graham was in the back of the wagon, making sure my new friends were behaving themselves. Leaving them to stew for a little while longer, I walked boldly through the door by myself and stopped to survey my surroundings. An aging man, his bald pate gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the window, sat at a desk positioned directly in front of me. He did not look up from his work, but kept scribbling away on a piece of paper. He had a fringe of dusty hair that bobbed in the air as he wrote. Watching this partial halo of hair dance on the air was almost mesmerizing. The station was dead, except for the pencil scratching. "Helen, what's—" he started to say, but cut himself off at the sight of me. His eyes grew larger, and I thought his mouth might open to make a little O of surprise. But he quickly straightened and neutralized his face, minus the mine of outsider distrust that everyone I had encountered here so far had perfected. "Can I help you?" There was an old wooden chair placed by his desk. I crossed over to it and sat down without being asked. "Sir, I am Cressida Curtin, and I am a professional bounty hunter." As I began my spiel, his eyes immediately glazed over. I'm sure every Tom, Dick, and Harry who arrived out of the blue was a so-called professional bounty hunter. I could barely blame his obvious dismissal. Oops. "What is this about, Miss Curtin?" he drawled at me. his cadence barely making cadence barely making the words into a question. He had gone back to perusing his paperwork, not even giving me his full attention. I recently obtained information about a wanted individual last seen in these parts. I was hoping to work with you to find said person. He practically rolled his eyes as he glanced my way. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there is a reason my office didn't post a bounty in the first place. We really don't want to be bothered by such trivial matters. You should take it up with the station that put up the bounty. Good day. Just like that, I was dismissed. I didn't move, however. I was under the impression that your job was to serve and protect your community. I assumed that helping a hunter to track down a potentially dangerous criminal would fall under that category, no matter how trivial his crimes may seem. As it stands, I have already apprehended 2 such criminals on my journey here. Given the location of their arrest, I'm most certain they fall under your jurisdiction. But seeing as how you don't really care about the safety of those town folks, I'll set them loose. Sorry to have bothered you. I stalked out before he could reply. He did not directly follow me out, as I had predicted he wouldn't. By this time, my presence had attracted a small crowd, which I assumed to be the majority of the townfolk. They had closed in tightly around my wagon, so I had to shove my way through. Once I got to the back of the wagon, I unlocked it and opened the doors. Grim stood at the opening, blocking the goons from view with his large body. The townspeople murmured amongst themselves at the sight of my partner. But then, from within, came the wild voice of Skinny. Help us! She's trying to kill us! If the collective gasps of the town hadn't done it, the sudden ravings of Skinny would hopefully be enough for the sheriff to leave his nest and see what was happening. Predictably, the sheriff did burst out of his station and pushed through the crowd towards me, metaphorically blood in his eyes. What is the meaning of this? He bellowed at me, getting close enough for me to smell his breath, which had the sour odor of an empty stomach. I flinched, almost precipitately. Sorry, yeah, that one I butchered. To breathe some fresh air. Once my lungs had been fortified, I turned towards his raft and smiled politely. These 2 men waylaid me on the back road, on a section that is, I lifted my voice to a higher pitch, technically part of Chargrove property. Their intention was to rob me, at the very least. I eyed Skinny, squinting my eyes at him in scrutiny, and I believe rape and even possibly murder might have also been on their minds. I faced the sheriff again. Wide-eyed, he squinted in the darkness of the wagon. But sir, now that you've so blatantly told me that your position on these matters, I was just about to let them go. Grim? Now, let's not be hasty, he sputtered the lawman. During my little speech, his eyes had adjusted to the inner gloom enough to see the 2 criminals. Turning back to me with an approved disposition, he said, These 2 have been a thorn in this community for some time. Young lady, let's get them safely behind bars so that we could discuss the matter of the bounty you needed information on. Sir, you are too kind, I replied. The crowd has started to back away, but still stay close, watching the entertainment unfold. A little name-dropping wouldn't hurt. As I said, Cressida Curtin at your service. The man tipped his bald head in my direction, His fringe danced merrily in the breeze. Jeremiah Boggs, Sheriff of Char Grove, at your service. Service with a smile, at least. Good. Give me a minute. Alright, here we go. How far? I can't remember how long this chapter is. Okay. Sheriff Boggs sat me down once the two bandits were tucked away. Grim came along because I never left him out of a discussion, even if he didn't fully understand every word. The sheriff initially balked at having the dog with me, but I made it clear it was happening with or without his approval, and Grim's yellow-eyed stare said he was not to be trifled with. So here I was, back in the wooden desk chair across from the sheriff while Grim sat on my side. There was a sandwich on the desk, which I was reasonably sure that appeared since my last visit to the inside of the station. Egg salad, by the smell. I noticed Grim's nose twitch appreciatively, and I tried not to do the same. Sheriff Boggs glanced at it, almost embarrassedly. The misuses. She always brings me dinner. The missus. She always brings my dinner about this time, he explained. I nodded. This won't take long. What information do you have? Can you point me in the direction to investigate? Boggs took another peek at his sandwich. I could have told him just to eat the damn thing, but I was still a little rankled by my earlier treatment. He sighed before answering. It was all petty little stuff up until a week ago. Annoying, but not worth our time, really. Sometimes vagabonds came through here and steal a little food from our community. They never stayed long, and the amount of the stuff they take isn't worth an investigation. He took his focus from his sandwich to look me in the eye. That changed last week when Henry got the stuff knocked out of him. That would be Henry Wicktaker? I hazarded, trying to remember the details of the rap sheet. Whitman. He owns a farm on the outskirts of Chargrove. He's an old-timer. Boggs chuckled to himself, adding, I guess we're all old-timers to be living here. But Henry's family had been here before Chargrove was even founded. The sheriff opened a folder on his desk, one that he had pulled from a file before he had sat down for his chat. Said he went to milk his cow first thing, sat down at the stool, and got pummeled from behind. A real kerfuffle. Poor Henry didn't even get a good chance to see his attacker, except at the end when he saw the kid running out of the barn door. And this kid had black hair? I asked. Boggs nodded. Yes, ma'am. According to Henry, anyway. Shaggy black hair with the height and build Henry assumed a teenager. I pursed my lips. Tell me, Sheriff, if you didn't put this bounty out, who did? Boggs glanced at his sandwich as if he held all the answers. He shrugged his shoulders. Honestly, beats me. It wasn't anybody in this area. Some high flaunting guy in a suit drove into town the day after it happened, took a similar statement from me, as I just gave you, and left. He said his client had been wronged by the same mystery person, and they were collecting evidence to build a case for a bounty. I gave him my 2 cents about not bothering, as Henry turned out to be fine and all, but this man basically told me to mind my own business. He scratched his fringe. I've been sheriff of Char Grove going on 30 years. Weirdest encounter I've had to date. Indeed. Well, Mr. Whitman's farm seems as good a place to start my search as any. I tapped my chin thoughtfully. Grim huffed softly, causing both myself and Boggs to stare at him. Although our expressions were vastly different, I nodded decisively at my partner before leveling my head as the man opposite me. Might you give me the address to Mr. Whitman's farm? I asked, my tone sweet. The sheriff was still watching Grim with a huge air of trepidation. He finally managed to move his head away from the beast to meet my eye. Of course, he replied unsteadily. He got out a scrap piece of paper and scribbled on it with the pencil from earlier. Then he handed it to me. Just take the south road from the square. Follow that until the road forks. Take the left fork. Can't miss it. I glanced at the paper and stuffed it in my breast pocket. One last question, I added. Have you talked to any other bounty hunter about this particular case? Boggs shook his head. You are the first and only, and hopefully the last, God willing. I internally breathed a sigh of relief. I had officially beaten my competition. So far, anyway. Standing, I thrust out my hand. Boggs hesitated, but took it before the pause became insulting. Sheriff, I appreciate your help. My wish is to not come back to bother you any time soon, I said with polite sincerity. He smiled. Young lady, that is my wish too. I know I said the meeting with the well-dressed man was my weirdest encounter, but being interviewed by a girl and her giant dog might just top that. It must be my lucky week. He smiled. Good luck to you. All right. Let's do a little break here. And then let me see about going on to chapter 9. So that didn't last as long as I thought it would. So that's good. Okay. Okay, I might be able to continue. I know. Okay, so I've been posting my videos on YouTube, but after chapter 9 they won't be posted. The author doesn't want the rest of the book, but so just out of respect of her and her work and stuff, that's what we're going to do. So all right. So let's see. Let's move on. All right, we're going to try chapter 9. So hopefully get situated here. Oh, hold on. She's so loud. Okay, sorry about that. Like I said, she's just super loud, and whatnot, and I know my mic will pick it up. And I can't really move her or anything, because, okay, so side thing. We have 4 cats, but one cat was, like, picking on this cat that's in this room with me. And so I can't move her because the other cat will pick on her again. So yeah, she's just kind of stuck here with me. All right, moving forward. Chapter 9. The farmhouse in front of me may have once been white, but was now more of a dirty beige, and the front door's paint had flaked off nearly everywhere. The sagging porch was littered with various liquor bottles, all empty. There were no welcome mat to speak of, literally or figuratively. I had followed Sheriff Boggs' instructions to the letter, so I sure hoped this was the right place, seeing as there wasn't any other farms in this direction. I knocked on the door and waited. Hold on. Yeah? What do you want? This rather rude greeting was issued at me through a peephole of the closed door. I assumed the bloodshot blue eye staring at me belonged to the man I needed to talk to. Henry Whitman. I suppose I should have been grateful that there wasn't a shotgun pointed at me. All things considered. Mr. Whitman, I ventured, I am on the trail of the criminal who assaulted you. Can I take a few moments of your time? The eyeball stared at me for just a moment longer before disappearing as the peephole closed. I worried for a moment that the man attached to the eye had ignored my request until I heard the scraping sound of a lock disengaging. The door opened with a protesting squeak as another scrape of paint flaked off and drifted to the ground. What do you need? Henry Whitman grunted. He wore a undershirt that must have been white at some point, but he had succumbed to the same dinginess that the house suffered from. His stained dungarees were unbuttoned, I noticed. Whitman had quite the impressive gut carried by legs that looked too skinny for his body. What remained of his hair was light and flowy and fell down into his eyes. He did not seem to notice. At his spoken words, the heady aroma of booze and onions rolled off him in attacking waves. I did my best to react to the stench. Not breathing too deeply, I said, "My name is Cressida Curtin. I'm a bounty hunter. This is Grim." I added with a head jerk to my partner on the right side. Whitman glanced at him and then back at me, unfazed. Not a typical reaction, but I continued. "I understand that you were attacked in your barn. Is that correct?" Another grunt, which I interpreted as yes. I forged on. "May we see the barn?" Whitman eyed me for a second, as if debating whether I was worth his time. He picked at something in his teeth before answering. "Come on." He stepped off his porch and sauntered towards the largest outbuilding on the property. We followed. The path of the barn took us by what was once a generously sized vegetable garden enclosed by a rustic fence made of sticks. As with everything else on this property, the garden was poorly maintained. In fact, as I walked single file behind Whitman, I could see that nearly everything within was practically dead from lack of water. Everything, that is, but the plants that were immediately next to the fence bordering our path. I noted peas, beans, and some sort of squash alive with vibrant lushness, a stark contrast to the rest of the dying plants. Whitman must have only been able to water what was easiest to reach. An odd choice, but Judging from the 2 minutes of knowing him, certainly not out of character. We came to a halt outside the dilapidated barn, pushing the odd garden design out of my mind. I turned my attention back to our host. Taking a key out of his pocket, he unlocked the massive barn door and held it open for us. Graham sauntered in first, looking relaxed, but I could tell he was alert. Mr. Whitman gestured for me to enter. I scanned the area, knowing full well that he could easily lock us in the barn if he wanted to, but that was just how my mind worked. Cats tend to be suspicious in nature. Shaking off the trepidation, I walked inside the musty barn. It smelled of cow dung, mold, and old hay. I suppressed the urge to sneeze. To my relief, the farmer did not lock us in, but followed up the rear, leaving the door wide open for a bit of fresh air. He walked over to the milking stall against one wall. This is where it happened, he muttered. 1 minute I was sitting ready to milk Veronica, and then wham! He mimed before hit on the back of the head. I was out for a solid minute. When I came to, the weasel was running out the door. Almost missed him. And he matched the descriptions of the other robberies? I asked. Whitman shrugged and then nodded. Black hair, like raven's wings, was really all I could see. But the way he run, gangly-like, he was a youngster. And Veronica is your cow? No, she's my wife. Whitman deadpanned to me. He gave me a second of utter confusion before adding, Of course she's my cow. What dumb question is that? I ignored that jab. Is your cow in the barn right now? She might have been a witness to the scene, and I thought it would be helpful to talk to her. Whitman stared at me with a quizzical frown forming on his otherwise inscrutable face. No, he said slowly, she ain't. She's free roaming this time of day. I shrugged, trying not to look like I had a screw loose. Just trying to get a picture formed, no worries. Whitman just kept staring, making me a tad nervous. Graham also stared at me, but not in the crazy person way. He really needed to talk, I could tell. I did some quick thinking. Thank you, Mr. Whitman, for your help. Might I have a moment to look around? He said nothing for a beat before shrugging again. Not sure what else you'll find. It's been almost a week. But go for it. I'll be on the porch. Don't steal anything. He turned and lumbered out. The moment he was out of sight, I ran over to a hay bale, hid behind it, and shimmered down. I ran back to Graham. What did you find? I asked. Graham grimaced. That human has problems. What, the boy? How can you tell? No, not the boy. The farmer. He smells like he's 2 days away from dying. Graham half sneezed to purge the scent from his nostril. Cats don't normally roll their eyes, but I picked up a few human traits. Focus, I yelled. I sniffed the air. My curiosity piqued. While my feline nose was no slouch, I didn't have Graham's gift of smells. Graham sniffed the air again. I caught a scent the moment we got on the path to the barn. It's stronger here. Mel, young, dirty, green. Green? I asked. Graham did the canine equivalent of a shrug. Like earth, like living things. Floretta smells green all the time, too. Except when she's just taken a shower. Then she smells of soap. Okay. Not important. Time was getting short. Can you track it? Let me see. Graham lowered his head and made a beeline for the barn exit. As soon as he was outside, he yelled back, I've got it. I think I can figure out which way he went. Excellent. I hastily transformed to human and followed Graham out. He continued down the path, but instead of going straight towards the farmhouse, he turned the corner of the mostly dead garden and made a beeline across an overgrown grassy field towards the road. Grasshoppers flew in a mass exodus from his path as he barreled through the yellow grass. He stopped at the road and yipped at me, the unusually high timbre of his bark a sign that the trail was still present. I nodded and made my way to the house again, stopping short of the porch but within eyesight of Whitman. I did a courtesy head bob. Sir, thank you for your time. We are going to try the road for clues. Are there any other roads or stops in this region that we should investigate? Henry Whitman scowled and rubbed his scraggly chin in thought. If you notice coming here, there's a road that connects to this one. There's an old abandoned school from Chargrove's heyday out that way. It's haunted to bits, though, so nobody in their right mind would go there. Haunted? I asked dubiously. The old man nodded. Yeah, about 50 years ago, when the prosperity dried up, those rich folks still kept sending their kids there, even as the town started to die. I was a youngster myself then, but my folks weren't rich, so I stayed on the farm. But then the haunting started and let loose some nasty diseases. Kids and teachers alike started dying, as I recall. He paused to scratch his grizzly chin again as he squinted at the horizon and thought. The folks pulled the rest of the kids, and everybody else left in a hurry. They didn't even bother to remove the stuff from the school or lock the doors. How sad, I commented. Whitman glanced at me as if he had forgotten I was there. Sad nothing, he responded rather harshly. He gave a loud snort to dislodge something from his throat, and then spat to the side away from me. Somebody's messed with things they shouldn't have. This town's had a death mark on it long before that. Those haughty-taughty school people should have seen the signs sooner. He paused again, pursing his lips. No matter now. Could very well be that the school is exactly where a young criminal might go. It'll seem like a safe place if you didn't know the history. Of course, he could also be long gone by now, too. Go on. Back the road you came, missy, and take the left fork instead of the right. Ain't nothing else but the school out there. But if you stay on the road, it eventually loops back to town. I gave more thanks for this information and trotted to my wagon. Time was of the essence in cases like these. Plus, if I was being honest with myself, I wanted to put some distance between myself and this creepy farm with its presumably dying man. Pause for a second. Oh, hi, Demon Fox. Thanks for coming. Give me a minute. I'm taking a drink. Alright, we're going to continue. We're on chapter 9, and after this chapter, we're going to continue on another day. So, alright. Graham stayed on foot, his nose to the ground as I followed with the wagon. Sure enough, his remarkable sense of smell led us to the left fork in the road, just as Whitman had predicted. Once off the wider road we had been following, this branch became a bit more swallowed up by the surrounding woods. The oldest trees here were perhaps 70 years old, with plenty of space in between for sprawlings to try to grow. Being late summer, the shade of the big trees felt nice. The sun peeked out pleasantly between the leaves. Hold on. All right. It was clear that no one ventured this way very often. Once we had traveled into the seclusion of the forest, I pulled Humbert over to the shoulder and hopped down. I got a bucket of water and some carrots from the back of the wagon for the old horse. It had been a long day, and he needed a break. Once he had consumed his refreshments, I turned into my true self. Humbert, Graham and I are going to scout ahead. Are you okay to stay here for a while? Delighted, as always, miss, he replied, ever stoic. Graham snuffled the ground. It's getting stronger, he said. Heart pounding with anticipation, I urged Graham to continue his search, keeping hot on his heels as he made his way down the lane. Presently, we found the old school. It was a relic of a bygone era. 3 stories tall, square, complete with a cupola at the front and a wide stone stairway to the grand, if shabby, double doors that marked the entrance. Oh wait, where did I go? I lost my spot. Okay. Tall, square, complete with a couple at the front and a wide stone stairway to the grand, if shabby, double doors that marked the entrance. Many tall windows faced the front of the building, and the whole thing was covered in a red brick facade. Where once a large yard surrounded the outside of the building, now there was a mess of tall, blooming grass, brambles, and saplings that encroached upon the crumbling building. It would have been a stunning piece of architecture back in its day, but now it was just a sad ghost of itself. Many of the tall windows had been broken, and some of the bricks were tumbled down. We paused at the start of the stone stairs, surveying the school. Do you think it's really haunted? I asked Grim, trying to sound nonchalant. I had filled him in on what Whitman had told me while we walked down the school together, his nose twitching the air. I don't know. Could be. But then again, sometimes humans are prone to mass hysteria. What if it was just a bad illness and not something supernatural? True. Can you smell ghosts? Graham glanced at me with humor in his eyes. No, he pointed his nose back towards the building, but I can smell our bounty. So he's here. Graham began sniffing the ground, turning in circles. At least up until recently. I do smell activity closer to the door, but it's stronger over this way. He turned and padded off to the right and continued behind the school. I followed. Graham stopped once we got to the edge of the woods, where the sapling gave way to the older trees. I could discern a small path leading deeper into the wilderness. Graham began to follow the path. I stayed put, turning my attention back to the dilapidated school. Why don't you go on ahead? I like to stay and check out the building for clues. He grunted. Fine by me. This trail is fresh, by the way. I'll follow it and let you know where it takes me. I'll meet you back at the school. He ambled away, still following his nose. I once again approached the double front doors, which, as Whitman had said, were not locked. I couldn't budge the heavy doors in cat form. However, sighing, I shimmered up. I had to admit that my human form had some perks. opposable thumbs being one of the biggest. I grasped the tarnished handle and pushed, easing myself into the dark hallway. Oh, sorry. Hold on, sorry. Okay. I'm not going to lie. It was spooky in there. I could almost hear the echoes of children long ago. Either now old, or most likely dead by this time. Whitman's story did not help, either, as I imagined the ghosts of deceased children trailing the halls for eternity. Perhaps they were waiting for unsuspecting people to enter their school, upon which they would grasp the victims in a cold embrace, chanting, "Come be our new playmate, forever and ever." I shivered theoretically. I collected my wits with a stern, eternal talking to and surveyed my surroundings. I stood in what must have been the foyer. Directly in front of me sat a grand staircase to the second floor, complete with a dusty and dingy carpet runner. To the left staircase was what I assumed to be the office. A small sitting area and a fireplace stood to the right of the stairs. Flanking me on both sides were dark hallways. Decisions. Which way to go first? At random, I chose the right-hand corridor and cautiously began walking. It was a spacious hallway, at least, with faded green paint above wainscoting on either side. The glancing at the first few doors I came across, I established I had found a classroom wing. The hallway turned a corner, and I continued to follow it. After a couple more classrooms, I came across side-by-side bathrooms, one for boys and another for girls. There was one last doorway at the very end of the hall, another classroom. From the looks of it, the door to this classroom was open. Whoops. Unlike all the other doors I had passed, my innate curiosity began to pester me. I quietly crept up and peeked in. The room was positioned so that upon entrance, the teacher would have stood off to the left of the door in front of the chalkboard, and the students would have sat to the right. A wall of windows faced me from my position in the doorway. The teacher's stately and solid desk took up the far left corner. At the very back of the room, there was a long table filled with beakers and test tubes. There was a human skeleton hanging out, quite literally, in the corner by the chalkboard. I hoped it was a replica and not the real thing. Even with my limited knowledge of human schools, the whole setup screamed science class to me. The desks were shoved into the room haphazardly. I crept forward slowly to investigate. While the majority were completely covered in dust, there were clean spots on certain surfaces, in the shape of fingers, smudges, and handprints. Someone had definitely touched these recently. I glanced towards the window, knowing the line of cabinets underneath them. Plant pots perched on top, some empty, some filled with dirt, and some containing the remains of dead plants. And at the far end of the cabinets, a whole cluster of plants, bright green, happy and healthy, flourished in their pots. Intrigued, I approached this collection of plants. My time with Floretta had helped me get to know my botanical species a little better. I could see that some of these pots held lettuce and spinach, and others contained tomatoes and berry bushes, which bore delicious and robust fruits upon them. I touched the lettuce, marveling at the healthy coloration of the leaf. Thriving plants were not what I had expected to find in an abandoned school. How did they get here? A noise from behind the teacher's desk had me stiffen and turn. If I were my normal self, my fur would be standing on edge. Trying to be brave and not think about ghost children, I inched towards the sound. My arms broke out in goosebumps. I could hear breathing from the corner of the room. "Hello?" I ventured meekly. Something shot out from behind the desk and ran cheetah fast past the chalkboard and out the door. That something was child size and definitely corporal, because it had rattled the skeleton as it ran past. I froze for just a moment, stunned. "Furballs," I muttered to myself as my body unlocked and gave chase. I stopped at the doorway, peering into the darkness of the hallway. I made it just in time to see a door closing with the telltale squeak of unused hinges. Bingo! I took my time walking the hallway, treading softly. My instincts told me the figure had most likely gone into the girls' bathroom, and sure enough, I could hear labored breathing from within the lavatory once I reached it. I waited a heartbeat. Give me 1 second again. Alrighty, let's continue. "Hello?" I tried again from outside the bathroom, hoping that this was the only way in and out of the room. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk to you. My name's Cressida." Silence. The labored breathing has ceased. I'm going to come in now," I continue in the friendliest, most non-threatening voice I could muster. I placed my hand on the door and gave it a small push. The door squeaked but gave way easily enough. I peeked in, my senses on alert. Natural light filtered in through large, frosted windows on the far wall from me, a few cracked and one with a sizable hole in the corner. They showed off a grimy yet elegant lavatory down up in shades of white and mint green. This bathroom must have been at the height of modernity at the time of its creation. A row of wash sinks lined the wall immediately to my left. Stalls lined the opposite with a very small alcove directly to my right. I almost didn't see the girl because the door initially blocked my view. She was hunkered down in the corner, knees drawn up to her chest with her arms hugging her body. I let myself in so she could get a good look at me. I wanted to appear harmless. This girl obviously was. I was bad at guessing the age of humans because I age so differently, but I would have put her at around 12 years of age. She wore simple clothes, layers of shirts, a smock, and leggings, all of it filthy. Her hair was chestnut colored and long. Were it not for the natural, sleek nature of it, I'm sure rats could have moved in a fortnight. Her face was rounded with a petite nose, and she was covered in grimy smudges. The dirtiness of her countenance made her hazel eyes stand out, shining with fear. She stiffened as I entered. I held up my hands. No, I soothed. "It's okay. I want to make sure you are all right. Can I help you?" She didn't move at first, but as I inched towards her, she seemed to lose a little of her fear. I held out my hand to her. She stared at it in apprehension and then reached out to grasp it. Standing, she was just a few inches shorter than me. She said nothing, but still stared with wide eyes. "Hello," I tried in a friendlier tone. "I'm Cressida." "What are you doing here?" the girl asked, Her voice seemed fearless, a direct contrast to her body language. Honestly, the question threw me off guard. Verbally stumbling, I thought frantically. Honestly, honesty seemed to be the best policy, but maybe I could focus on getting her out of here instead of having an odd conversation in the bathroom. What was the best route? I realized I didn't have any experience with kids. I began to slowly turn her towards the door. As I said, I'm Cressida. I'm investigating a criminal in these parts, and his last known whereabouts were near this school. So I was checking out the building. I didn't expect to run across a girl like you. The girl had been amiable about moving as I spoke, but now she put the brakes on and spun to me. Criminal? She asked, cautious again. I tried again to usher her towards the door. She was not budging, and she was in front of me. Perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned the criminal. Clearly she was afraid of any potentially dangerous activity. Perhaps she had even already had a run-in with him. Yes, I explained. Have you seen somewhere around here? Black hair, young. Are you in trouble? She stared at me with stony expression. Ever so slowly, the blank face turned to one of pure rage. My skin prickled. Obviously, I had said the wrong thing. I frantically thought over possible damage control option. Criminal? She repeated with high-pitched venom. No, I'm not in trouble. But you are. At those words, this sweet little girl began to grow. Her limbs became longer, her muscles expanded, and hair sprouted all over her body. Within 2 seconds, I was staring at the biggest, ugliest werewolf I had ever seen, and it was blocking the only exit. So just some reminders to follow me, so you could definitely now, so you get notified of when I go live again. Cause like when I stream again, so that you can find out what happens next. So follow me on here to get notified. YouTube, I'm on YouTube, Bookstagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of that. And like I said, I got new videos and stuff that's going to be being posted. So I'm excited. So yeah, this is great. So I don't really, if nobody has anything to say, I don't have anything else to say either. So, you know, if you love the book so far and you love what you're hearing, just hit follow, subscribe, whatever it is, you know. So, alrighty then. Well, that's it for me. So I will see you guys later.